today's gospel is chosen for today because of these words, full of grace. Full of grace is like the nickname that the angel gives to Mary when she visits Mary for the first time. And has anyone here studied Greek? So in Greek, this phrase is actually all one word, and it goes like this: Kecharitomene, the grace-filled one, all hyphenated, the grace-filled one. It's all one word, so it makes like a perfect nickname, right? Today is the Immaculate Conception. Trick question. Does that refer to the conception of Jesus or to the conception of Mary? That's right, it is Mary. We're not talking about the conception of Jesus, but the conception of his mother, who was conceived immaculate. That's what we say when we mean she was conceived without original sin. So today we celebrate the fact that Mary was conceived. Pretty awesome, pretty exciting stuff. And that's so special because Mary was conceived in a way that was different from the way that every other person since Adam and Eve were conceived. Everyone else was conceived with original sin. Mary was the only one who was conceived without it. So what is original sin?
Adam and Eve transmitted to their descendants human nature wounded by their own first sin and hence deprived of original holiness and justice. This deprivation is called original sin.
Original sin is kind of like trying to drive a vehicle that has messed up steering. So I grew up on a farm, Bruce County, Chepstow, Ontario, really small town. And we had this old red tractor that had the steering wheel, which would constantly be going a little bit to the right. You know, it was just a completely beat up old tractor, you know, the torn up seat, like leather pieces falling off and like fuzz coming out of it. And it made a lot of noise, and the sticky clutch that sometimes wouldn't work. So you couldn't actually change gears, but it worked. And the big problem was the steering. As you're driving around, you've got this steering wheel that's constantly pulling a little bit to the right. And you know what that's like? In order to go straight or to go to the left, you've got to pull really hard the other way. If you let go for a second, or you kind of get tired and your arms get weak, then you start going off the road, right? Or off the field if you're driving through the middle of the field. Original sin is kind of like that. It's like this tendency that we all have as human beings to not get things right all the time, or to get things wrong sometimes. And I think that like that tendency to sin is one of the things that is most obvious about Catholic teaching, which you can see everywhere you look. You look at the fact that from the very first day we're born, babies don't come out of their mother's wombs into the world smiling and laughing, usually. Sometimes they smile and laugh, sure, but they also come out into the world crying. Look at our own relationships. Look at our relationships in our families. How many of us come from families that just aren't perfect, period? I mean, why is it so hard to have the perfect family? Everyone would love to have relationships where nobody ever gets hurt, and where everyone always respects each other, and where everyone's always happy. Look at kids on the playground in your elementary school. You know, if you walk by a playground, sure, you'll hear lots of laughing and lots of having fun, but there's always somebody screaming. Why is it so hard for people to get along and to get things right? You leave kids alone for 5 minutes on the playground, and what do? They start fighting. It happens with us. You fall in love all the time. If you're a teenage boy, it's just normal to fall in love with somebody like every day. And I mean, why does it rarely go well? Why is it like all the time our relationships are ending up getting messed up and we end up hurting someone? I think that the doctrine that the Catholic Church teaches of original sin, which is the doctrine that we all have this tendency towards evil and we all tend to get things wrong all the time, is one of the most obvious truths of our faith and is most apparent when you look at the world around you. It's clear. You don't even need to argue it. You just look at people. There's something wrong with us. That's what original sin teaches us. And so today we look at Mary, and I'm going to actually show you here. Like this is Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's a really beautiful image of her. We look at Mary and we say, Mary is different from everybody else. Okay, so Mary's perfect, right? She was conceived without original sin. She was conceived without this problem that everybody else has. What does that matter to me? You might be asking yourself. Well, first off, original sin doesn't just make a mess of our life. it doesn't just hurt us. It doesn't just make our life more hard. Original sin can eventually even cause our own destruction. So I don't really have the option, I'd say, of giving up and saying, okay, I'm not even, if it's so hard to be good, I'm just going to not try to be good anymore. That's not an option for us, because if we give up, it can end up destroying us. It can end up ruining our families. It can end up ruining my own habits, make me do things that in the end I know are going to hurt me. In high school, I had a friend who I played hockey with on our hockey team. And one night after a party, he was driving home and had too much to drink and ended up getting in an accident. And I think that you could say, well, yeah, I'll be smart, I'll never do that. But if you live your life as part of a culture that makes it more likely for that to happen, then someday you're going to lose something. Someday it's going to hurt you. And if you want to overcome the things that in the end are going to lead to destruction in your life, then you've got to live a life of virtue. If I don't overcome my laziness, it could ruin my career. If I don't overcome my pride, it can ruin my relationships. If I don't overcome my sensuality, then it can ruin my health. If I don't overcome my lust, then it could ruin my marriage someday. It could ruin my family. So it matters to us, the fight against this original sin, which gives us that steering wheel tendency. It matters to us. If we want to hold on to that steering wheel and keep it straight, we have to do that in order not to deviate off the road, not to be losing control. So that's an important lesson from this gospel today, is that we want to overcome sin. We want to overcome the tendency that we have. But why do we talk about Mary? Why do we talk about this person? What's so special about her? Well, we're kind of in a situation that stinks because we're stuck with sin and we're stuck with this tendency that we have. And the Bible teaches us that humanity hasn't always been this way. Humanity didn't start out with sin. Humanity started out perfect. Adam and Eve were the ones who were perfect, who didn't have original sin either. Trivia question, who was the first one to commit a sin? Here's the big question. Can we get it back? Can we ever get back that state of perfection and harmony again that Adam and Eve had at the beginning? Can we get rid of this tendency that we have? Will we ever be free? And that's the whole theme of today's feast day of Mary and the Immaculate Conception. And that's why we read this gospel in which we say that Mary is full of grace, because we're talking about that state of wholeness and completeness and holiness and goodness. We're talking about the possibility of being restored to the state which was the way that God made us and God wants us to be. And the theme of Mary and the Immaculate Conception is all about that question. Can I, you could put it this way. Could I ever have skin as perfect as my favorite supermodel? Is a good image for what it's like to get rid of sin in our lives. And the message of today is there has been a person who has lived free and pure and holy and perfect, who has restored that situation of perfect beauty, perfect spiritual beauty without sin. And it's Mary. So is it possible to get back to that state? Yes, it is. There is someone who already got it back. Mary marks the beginning of a new era for humanity. Humanity, up until the time when Mary was conceived, was every single person stuck with that steering wheel tendency of always going off the road. So here's another question for you. What does Mary's perfection matter to me? What's so great about her being perfect if I'm still imperfect and I've still got this mess in my life? Well, here's the answer to that question. Mary shows us what God's grace is capable of doing in my life. Mary was made perfect not because of something that she did. It happened at the moment of her conception. It happened before she even existed. It was because of something that Christ did, something that Jesus did for her. Jesus died on the cross. Later on, of course, and won by his death and his sacrifice, by his wounds and his blood. He won for Mary the grace needed to make her perfect from the moment she came into existence. You see, God kind of works outside of time in a way that is mysterious to us, but it kind of makes sense. Is God bound by time? No. When God dies on the cross, he's capable of doing things in the past. And that's what he did for Mary. Jesus' death on the cross doesn't just change Mary's life, and it doesn't just make her capable of living a life that's pure and holy and good. His grace won for us by dying for us on the cross gives me and you the possibility of living a life that is holy and that is good and that is pure. And one day, even if we don't achieve perfect holiness and purity here on this earth, one day his grace from the cross will purify us perfectly and allow us to live that life of holiness in heaven when we're united to him. The merits of Christ's passion, of his blood, can do that for me too. So I think this is a pretty groundbreaking reality. It's a breakthrough for me, and I hope it is for you too. Because what does this teach me? It teaches me one thing, that I certainly need to learn to fight against sin in my life. I certainly need to renew my commitment to fight against the things that are going to always make me deviate off the path of goodness and lead towards destruction in my life. And what else does it show me? It shows me that I have so much hope, that there's a life that is so much better waiting for me, and that Mary is the example of how to already live that life. Well, I hope that today's Feast of the Immaculate Conception is a great day for you, and I hope that this message of God's promise of renewing us and giving us a better life and a more holy and perfect life is inspiring to you to strive to surrender your life to Christ. God bless you.